Welcome everyone to this presentation. In this presentation, I want us to look at the Wasteland poem. I want us to look at the Wasteland poem. So, this poem was actually written by T.S. Eliot, a very renowned poet, and I came up with this Wasteland poem after the First World War. So this is actually a very influential poem of the 20th century. It is actually trying to compare the before the First World War, how the world was, and after the First World War. So there is this comparison between the First World, the past and the present. So what we are actually looking at here is a very renowned poem, and this poem actually won a lot of prizes. It actually came as the poetry award for the year, and it actually appeared in the magazine that was called Dio or Dow, we can say. Yeah. So this same poem received some of the criticizing, or some of the critics had to actually criticize to say, okay, this poem is not a good poem, and also others actually said this is a very good poem. That criticism and that actually um, grabbing to say, okay, this is a great poem, and some other people said, oh, this is not actually great. This is not a great poem. So that is what we are looking at now. This same Wasteland poem, what is it that we look at? Actually, the lines, we can say there are 434 lines. So now this poem is written in actually 434 lines, and it is actually divided into five sections. We are actually going to see those five sections. So this poem is actually trying to give us the life in London after the First World War, and Elliot is actually trying to actually give us the description of the causes of the First World War. That is what we are looking at in this poem. So how this world war actually impacted the world at that time after the fighting between this country and this country. Now, what was the aftermath? What is now the causes of this world war? What is it that we are looking at? And then also, when we look at this same poem, Eliot actually used different types of actually literary devices. He used, for example, we are going to actually see myths being actually used. We also are going to see legends also being used with the help of allusions, with symbols, quotation, and also phrases. And also, we are also going to actually see pastiche involving of other what other people have said in the past and their lines, and trying to make just something look good. So this poem is in actually a mixture of many styles, like narratives, also dramatic lyric, and also allusiveness. We are actually going to actually see that. So that is what this poem is actually trying to tell us: the aftermath of the First World War, and what is it that we are trying to talk about now. How does Eliot describe the physical wasteland in his poem? What is it that he's trying to actually look at in this poem? So he's actually trying to tell us to say this wasteland, which is a city that is actually trying to actually suffer from what we call spiritual decay and also degeneration, is actually trying to give us the picture of the aftermath of the first world war. So everything that is actually depicting is actually the frustration and the failure of the modern society. It's trying to tell us to say this society that we have, the modern society that we have, is not a good society, and this society should actually be looked at. Now, let's also look at what he's trying to talk about, looking at the first line that we actually meet in the first section. The line goes like this: what are the roots that clench? What branches grow out of this what is stone what rubbish? This is what I'm talking about, what I've highlighted here. That is the line that I'm talking about. So it is actually obvious that we cannot actually have anything to grow out of this barren civilization. We are saying what is happening here? Nothing can grow out of this barren thing. So this the world is barren, and everything that is coming of it is actually something that we can someone cannot make out of. Nothing can actually come out of this barren world. Nothing can grow of this world. So that is what the poet is trying to tell us, and he's actually trying to give a picture of the spiritual and moral chaos that we actually have in the decay of European society. So we are saying this society is actually decaying, or is actually in that way that is not a good way. So he is actually trying to bring out the picture of the past and the present through the employment of what he's trying to actually picture, bring out the myths and also allusions. So that is what we are actually trying to look at in this what in this in this poem. Yeah. So that is what we are actually looking at now. T.S. Eliot actually divided this poem in 5 sections. So, what are these sections that actually T.S. Eliot divided his poem into? So, he divided this poem in 5 sections. He's actually trying. You actually, I had actually to sit down and actually give myself time to read. I think I read 5 to 6 times before I started understanding the third time. I went through the whole poem. That is when I started picking what he was actually trying to look at in the symbols that are there, and what is actually trying to look at in this what in this poem. That is what we are looking at now. This poem, for clear understanding, it was actually divided in 2 sections, and these sections are: the first one is the burial of the dead, and then the second one is the game of chess. The third one is the fire sermon, and the fourth one is death by water. And then we also have what the thunder said. And then we also have what the thunder said. So now let's quickly look at what each and every section is trying to tell us. What are we actually looking at? Looking at each and every section. What is it that is being talked about when we actually look at section by section? Because looking at the whole poem, actually, we are not actually to actually make anything out of it. The understanding is going to actually be surface. But if we go section by section, we'll actually get something of this poem that has actually been divided in 2 sections. Let's quickly dive into this thing. So the first section is what we call the burial of the dead. So when we are looking at the burial of the dead, we are actually trying to actually picture out the degeneration and rootlessness of the modern man and his civilization. That is why now this modern man has actually involved himself into sex, gambling, these worldly things, just violence and the like. So this has made this society to dry up, and it cannot actually give anything out. That is why we are saying the rebirth is actually there. It is possible, but this rebirth is just something that can come from the spiritual and moral values, which this modern man should actually try by all means to go back to revive his spiritual way, and also the moral values that have actually been moved. And these are some of the things that he's trying to tell us, to say yes, the rebirth can be there, and this modern man can only be a new person if he's actually going to consider the way he was looking at himself spiritually, and also the moral values, or the way that he should actually live, what should actually be taken into consideration. That is what we are looking at in the first section. And then the second section that we have is what we call the game of chess. This is my favorite section, because it talks about how this woman, a very beautiful woman, sitting on this luxurious chair, and we actually given that elite elite life, and also the relationship thing. Yeah. So in the game of chess, what we are actually trying to actually point out, or to indicate what the poet is trying to tell us, is that sex what relationship has failed. So the relationship now in the modern world is just a physical relationship. Actually, sex has become a mere act of entertainment, and it has actually lost its what its moral and social purpose. So we can actually pick in the high and low life, everything, it is just the same. So that is why we are saying this has made this modern life to be unproductive and disorderly. That is what we are looking at in the game of what? In the game of chess. That is what we actually look at. And you should not forget that this whole poem is talking about this main character or the protagonist who is Tiresias. That is the character that we are looking at throughout this same poem. And then now we have the third section, and the third section is what is called the fire what? The fire sermon. So when we are looking at the fire sermon, this has actually been borrowed from Buddha. What we are actually depicting to say the fire sermon, they have a sermon that they call the fire sermon. And in the first sermon, we have this man and the woman. The woman does not even like the man that much, but the man forces himself on the woman. And the woman is always happy when the man leaves. So this first sermon shows the lust and rape are responsible for the decay of the what of the modern world. What we are saying is the bad things that the modern man is actually doing now have actually resulted in the decay of the modern what society. And the poet actually says, let us actually pray to God to save the modern civilization from lust and what? Spiritual degeneration. You see? So T.S. Eliot is trying to tell us to say, what is happening in this modern day or in this modern society is not good. The lust and rape are responsible for the decay. He's trying to tell us to say, all these bad things that we do are the ones that are actually responsible for the suffering, for the actually decaying of this what? Modern society. And then the fourth one, we have what we call the death by water. This is also one of my good section. I like this section because it is a very short section and it is the shortest section of these other sections that we are looking at. So among these sections that we have, the shortest is death by water. So death by water actually presents the death of Philippus. And Philippus is actually someone who is a very rich person. And this rich person does not actually live his life in a good way. But we are taught in this poem to say the depiction or the bringing in of water is actually trying to give us a symbol of purification and rebirth. He's saying purification and rebirth can only be made through what? Water. Because when you bath, for example, water, we use it for bathing, for cleaning things. So that is what we are trying to look at, purification and what? Rebirth. And then now what we are looking at this Philibus is that we are devised to say Philibus, once a very what important person, is now dead and is actually trying to see how these bones are actually going down, how is actually his death, and there is actually no rebirth for him because he lived his actually life through looking at worldly pleasures. He enjoyed the world through just looking at he lived his life in a bad way. In short, he wasn't living his actually life in a good way, but in a bad way. That is why there is no rebirth for him. In this same section, we are even advised to say, you Gentiles and non-Gentiles, actually take the example of this Philibus, who was once a very handsome man, but is now dead, and there is no rebirth for him. Meaning, he lived his life in a bad way. Even rebirth, there is no for him. That is what we are looking at in this death by what? By water. And they actually, what T.S. Eliot is trying to tell us is purification and the rebirth is only through water. That is what we are looking at. And we are taught to say, as modern people, let's look at the picture of Philibus. Philibus, once a very handsome man and rich man, is now dead and there is no rebirth for him. That is what death by water is trying to actually tell us. And then we also have what the thunder said. What the thunder said now is actually trying to, T.S. Eliot is trying to comment. T.S. Eliot is trying to bring out the comment, looking at what the world needs. And he says that it is impossible to actually reform the whole world, and wonders where the change should come from. So what we are saying is it is very impossible to reform this world, and we actually, where should we start from? actually change should start from you. He's actually trying to advise us to say change should start from himself. The writer, the poet who is now T.S. Eliot is trying to tell us to say change actually should come from where? From me. That is what we are actually looking at there in what the thunder said. So he's trying now to pull out or to actually speak his mind to say what should actually happen is this. What should we have? That is why he's saying what the thunder said suggests that there is need of effort for realization of spiritual goal, meaning uh, realizing that we need God. We need to turn to the cross and actually repent and have this what new life. That is what we are actually looking at in what the thunder what said. And then now, let's also look at the analysis of this T.S. Eliot's book. So when we look at this T.S. Eliot's text, which is the Wasteland, this is an historical landmark in English poetry, and it is actually a basic document on contemporary what society, today's society. So it is actually trying to tell us today's society how it is, and this same poem or this same writing, it is actually trying to mirror the post generation, the post-war generation, meaning the aftermath of the First World War. So the poet T.S. Eliot is trying to actually review, is trying to actually give us the disillusionment caused by the First World War. He also shows the his dissatisfaction with what the so-called scientific what achievement and industrial progress of Europe. So he's not actually being satisfied with this new technology that is coming in, the modern thing that we are actually sure to say, okay, the modern what modern world. So him is not actually happy with that. That is what we are actually looking at in this what in this poem. So what I've discussed is what I want you to also understand, and I just want to actually make one thing clear to say this was first written as what as just one thing, a poem, just, and it is a poem, of course. Now it was actually divided in two sections for his what understanding. So that is why um it was actually taken down in two sections for you people to do what to understand, and it is actually in 434 lines. Some people say it is 433, but there are 434 what lines that we do actually meet in this what in this section. And the protagonist or the main character that this guy used is actually what we call Teresias. He runs through, he's trying to give us to say Teresias lived his life in a two-way, meaning is a woman and also a man. That is what he actually is told in this poem. So that is why he's even been used as the what the protagonist of this poem, because he lived his life in two ways. Is actually sometimes a woman, is sometimes what a man. That is what we are actually looking at. That is why Tiresias is the one who has been what used in this what in this poem as what as the protagonist or the main character of this poem. So thank you very much. My name is Gift Chungu Chungu, and kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel so that whenever I post something, you'll be well noted to actually come and see what I've posted. And thank you very much for watching, and make sure you do likewise. Hit the subscribe button and make sure you come back. Thank you very much, because I'm yet actually to introduce some other courses on this same YouTube channel. I'll be posting EDU. I'll also be posting Ing courses. Also, scientific also presentations will also be there as time goes. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching. We meet in the in another presentation. Thank you.